Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. A very good morning to everyone and welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Now before we begin, why don't you show us some love and support by pressing that like button, share your comments below and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also don't forget, as soon as the session ends, we are going to have a quiz on our Telegram channel based on the topics that we are discussing today. So do subscribe to our Telegram channel, the link has been provided in the description below. And ensure that you comprehensively prepare for the upcoming prelims. So first, let's take a look at the topics we're going to cover in today's The Hindu analysis. We're going to talk about India-Canada relations because today we have a very important editorial on page number 6 that is related to India-Canada relations. We shall examine this topic in detail as it is very important for international relations. Then we shall talk about the health sector in India, the budgetary allocation that has been made towards the health budget. So there's an important column in which the writer is of the opinion that the health sector has been neglected and this will have serious consequences for healthcare in India. Next, we have a very important column from Polity on page number 7. It refers to the declining voter participation in Indian elections. It refers to 30 crore missing voters who don't participate in the electoral process. So this is an important analysis that we shall be carrying out today. And we will take a look at a science and technology topic. We shall be talking about the CAR T cell therapy, which has been making a lot of news with regard to cancer treatment. And finally, we shall talk about left-wing extremism in India because Home Minister Amit Shah has made an important statement to the Parliament. According to the Union Home Minister, Naxal violence has gone down by 76% in the last few years. So these are the important topics we have lined up for today. So just stay with me for the next 50 to 55 minutes and I promise that we'll cover these topics comprehensively. You will not need any other source, any other material for these topics. We'll ensure that for both prelims and mains, we are going to cover these topics comprehensively. So let's start with the first article, an editorial from page number 6 related to India-Canada relations. First, let's understand the context. Why is this topic in news? Why do we have India-Canada relations in news? This topic is in news because Canadian Foreign Minister has paid an important visit to India on the 6th and 7th of Feb. She has met with India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and both the leaders have held important talks to take forward the India-Canada relations. See, this relationship is very, very important as Canada is a key Western country. India-Canada have shared a historical relationship, but unfortunately, this relationship has seen a lot of ups and downs in the past. There have been some positive achievements in the relationship. There have been some downside as well in this relationship. So we need to talk about these relations in detail, understand the background, understand the key moments in this relationship, and evaluate the current state of relations. This becomes all the more important in the context of the upcoming G20 summit. As you know, India is hosting the G20 presidency. We are holding several ministerial meetings through the year on various issues, which will culminate with the G20 summit, where the leaders of all the G20 countries will be coming to India. So India has been carrying out a major outreach to all the G20 members and Canada is a very important G20 member. It is also a member of the G7 and a key Western industrialized nation. So India's ties with Canada becomes important on this account. We share very important economic relations, political and diplomatic relations as well, and even the security relations have become very important between the two countries. So let's carry out a detailed examination of this relationship. Let's take a look at the background. Let's see how relations have developed between the two since 1947. See, even during the colonial period, that is even before India became independent, we have had a very strong connect with Canada because a number of Indian immigrants, they moved out during the colonial period and a large Indian community settled in Canada, especially the Sikh community from Punjab. started settling in large numbers, and this provides a natural cultural connect and a people-to-people connect in this relationship. So there is a very strong cultural connection dating back to the colonial period, and post-independence, as both India and Canada are part of the Commonwealth, both have been working together as they share common principles, common values. Both are open liberal societies, democracies, plural societies, which play host to a diverse population. This is something that brings India and Canada together. We have a long-standing bilateral relationship built on the foundation of democracy, pluralism, etc. But the defining aspect of India-Canada relations has to be the cultural connect. We have a very strong diaspora community in Canada, which accounts for nearly 4% of Canada's population. Now that is quite a significant number. You have close to 1.4, 1.5 million people of Indian origin, of Indian heritage. Several families have settled in Canada permanently, become Canadian citizens. Along with that, every year, thousands of Indian students, Indian professionals travel to Canada to study and work. So we have a very, very important cultural connect because of the Indian community that is present in Canada. Especially the Sikh community has been very influential, very prominent, and many members of the diaspora community have become very influential in Canada. Many of them run successful businesses. Many of them have become politicians. They have entered elections in Canada. They have become ministers as well in the Canadian government. So this is something that provides India a natural advantage, a natural leverage when we deal with Canada. See, this relationship began on a very friendly note post-independence. After India became independent, as part of the Commonwealth, Canada started assisting India. It was one of the first countries from the Western world to start providing aid and assistance to India. From 1951 itself, under the Colombo Plan, which mainly focused on education and resource development, Canada started providing aid and assistance to India as India was struggling with poverty, lack of education, food insecurity. So to help India on all these accounts, Canada supplied food aid, invested in key projects, and even gave technical assistance to India to develop the scientific base in India, especially with regard to civil nuclear cooperation. Starting right from 1950s, Canada was one of the first countries in the world to establish nuclear cooperation with India. It supplied a nuclear reactor called the CIRUS, the Canada-India Reactor Utility Services, in 1954, which was established at BARC, the Baba Atomic Research Center at Trombay, which was championed by Homi Jahangir Baba. This was the second nuclear reactor to be built in India. Is that clear? Initially, the US had started helping India in nuclear energy, and Canada became the second nation, the second country from the Western world to assist India in the nuclear domain. In 1954 itself, it had supplied a civilian nuclear research reactor. But India would extract weapons-grade plutonium from this Canadian reactor, and we used the plutonium in India's first nuclear device, which was tested in 1974 at Pokhran under Operation Smiling Buddha. India went against the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the international regime, and we tested nuclear weapons in 1974, which invited the wrath of all the Western countries. Canada especially was extremely angry with India because India had used the Canadian reactor to extract weapons-grade plutonium to build a nuclear device. So this affected India-Canada relations. The nuclear test, Operation Smiling Buddha, carried out under the Indira Gandhi government, had an impact on India-Canada relations, and Canada snapped all the nuclear energy cooperation ties that existed. Because India had reverse engineered the nuclear technology. We had used the Canadian reactor to produce the plutonium for this nuclear weapon. So this led to a direct impact on the bilateral relationship. And also please understand, 1970s and 1980s was a very tough period for India during the Cold War. Because especially during the 1971 war, when India liberated Bangladesh and broke Pakistan into two parts, the United States had provided complete support to Pakistan and the US had become hostile to India. So as the US became hostile to India, all its allies, its Western allies, especially NATO allies, including Canada, also became very cold towards India. So the India-Canada relations were badly affected during this period due to all these developments. Then came a turbulent period in the relationship, especially the 1980s. This was India's most brutal decade, particularly with regard to Punjab, as the Khalistan terrorist movement had escalated to become one of India's biggest security threats. By 1970s, the Khalistan movement had started raging, and with direct support from Pakistan, various Khalistan terror groups had started targeting India in Punjab. From across the border, Pakistan was providing drugs, weapons, funds and training to various Khalistan extremist outfits. Khalistan sentiments started taking root within the Sikh diaspora community as well, across European countries such as UK, Germany, Italy, also in US and also in Canada. Within the diaspora community, the Sikh extremists started getting support and Canada started ignoring these developments. Despite India's appeals, despite India providing evidence regarding their extremist activities, the Canadian intelligence agencies, the Canadian security forces, wouldn't act against Khalistan extremists, and this became a major divide in the relationship. Especially after Operation Blue Star in India and the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and the anti-Sikh riots that followed, there was a wave of support within the diaspora community for the Khalistan movement. This even led to the bombing of an Air India flight, Air Kanishka, which was flying from Canada to India. In 1985, Khalistan terrorists belonging to Babar Khalsa International, which is a designated terror outfit, bombed Air Kanishka and more than 300 passengers and crew were killed, which at that point was the biggest terror attack of its kind. It was the biggest aviation-related terror incident at that point of time. And it was carried out by Canadian Khalistan terrorists. And the Canadian government had failed to act against them despite repeated warnings from India. So all these developments had deeply affected India-Canada relations for a very, very long period. This had put a big strain on the relationship, even though the close cultural relations continued, especially after 1990s and in early 2000. Indian students, workers, professionals, they continued moving to Canada to study and work. But otherwise, the diplomatic relations were very badly affected because of Canada's failure to act against Khalistan extremism. These relations started improving only after 2001, only after the US opened up towards India following the 9/11 attacks. And as India started getting closer to the Western countries, even Canada started reviving its relations with India. Because by then, India had witnessed an economic boom due to the LPG reforms, and India was becoming a very lucrative market as well for these countries. India was also looking out for economic technical assistance from other countries. So it was only natural for India-Canada to start working together from 2000 onwards. This relationship received a major boost in 2010 when then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh paid a visit to Canada and signed a civil nuclear cooperation agreement. This was a landmark development because just years before this, India and US had signed a civil nuclear cooperation agreement. This had led to the lifting of sanctions on India, economic and technological sanctions that were placed on India for its nuclear weapons program. These sanctions were lifted and the US supported India to become a member of the nuclear suppliers group without signing the non-proliferation treaty. Because India has committed that we'll never sign non-proliferation treaty as it's a discriminatory treaty. The non-proliferation treaty allows only the P5 countries, the 5 permanent members of UNSC, to retain their nuclear weapons while prohibiting nuclear weapons for other countries. So India has always retained the option of developing and maintaining nuclear stockpile. So we have made it clear that we'll never sign non-proliferation treaty. So as India-US relations grew and as India-US signed a the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, the US helped India to become a member of NSG without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The US gave a NSG exemption for India. So other countries like Canada also started rebuilding their ties in the nuclear domain. And Canada also recognized India's responsible nuclear program and agreed to support India's membership to NSG without signing the NPT. So this led to a significant improvement in the relationship, and India-Canada have really improved their economic and technical relations since then. In 2015, Prime Minister Modi also paid a visit to Canada. Few more agreements were signed. A lot of cultural initiatives were taken up to bring India closer to the diaspora community. So relations were actually improving during this period. But on the other hand, we are yet to become a member of NSG because mainly China is blocking India's entry into it. While most countries are supporting India to become a member of NSG without signing NPT, China has placed a technical hold, and hence India has not been able to become a member of the NSG. But otherwise, countries like Canada, various European countries including US, have all backed India's entry into the nuclear suppliers group. So this itself signifies how strategic relations have developed between India and Canada over the years. But in the last 4 to 5 years, there has been a lot of turbulence again in the relationship. A lot of new issues have come up. For example, in 2018, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was on a visit to India. But this became a highly controversial and disastrous visit because the Prime Minister's delegation included Jaspal Atwal, who is a convicted terrorist in India, and he is a member of International Sikh Youth Federation, which is a designated Khalistan terror group. The International Sikh Youth Federation has been designated under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, as a terrorist organization. Jaspal Atwal has been convicted of a terror attack that happened in 1986. The International Sikh Youth Federation and its members had attempted to assassinate a Punjab minister. This was an attempt to murder by a terror group, and Jaspal Atwal was involved in this attack. He was convicted in Indian courts. He had fled India, taken refuge in Canada. There he had become a successful businessman, very close to Canadian politicians. So the Prime Minister's delegation, which was visiting India in 2018, included this convicted terrorist. And this led to a diplomatic standoff. India objected to the inclusion of Jaspal Atwal in the delegation, and it triggered a diplomatic crisis between India and Canada. India downgraded this visit of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and the relations were very badly affected because parallelly we were witnessing a resurgence of Khalistan activities in Western countries. In the last few years, active attempts are being made by Khalistan extremists to revive the Khalistan movement both in India and abroad. Across European countries, in UK, Italy, in Canada, US, in Australia as well, we have seen many developments in the recent years which are aimed at reviving the Khalistan movement. So India again has been concerned that Canada is not assisting India enough to tackle the threats posed by Khalistan extremists. On the other hand, another controversy broke out with regard to India's farm laws. The controversial farm laws that were introduced by the Modi government led to massive protests by farmers in Punjab, which received a lot of support from Canada. The Sikh diaspora community supported the farmers' protests, and the Canadian government and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed support and even made comments on India's laws and India's policies. Canadian Prime Minister even gave public statements about the curbing of rights and freedom in India. So these developments and these statements from Canada has again strained the relationship in the last few years. Plus, we have seen attempts to hold a so-called Khalistani referendum. Khalistani extremists have tried to hold these elections, so-called elections, both online and offline. And of late, we have seen repeated attacks on Indian interests in Canada. Indian temples, Indian community members have been attacked. Indian embassy has been defaced. And a lot of developments have happened on these lines, which clearly points to an attempt to revive the Khalistan movement. This is happening in Australia as well, across European countries as well. And Canada is a focus country for Indian agencies because this is where the biggest threat lies for India. So India is urging Canada to cooperate. We have even signed a counter-terror cooperation agreement to exchange intelligence and to cooperate with each other. But despite this, there is a strain in the relationship because of these recent developments. So that is the reason why India and Canada are taking the opportunity to repair the damage which has happened again. For India, it's a priority to work with Canada, especially this year, because we are hosting the G20 summit. Canada is an important member of the G20 and the G7. It plays a critical role in the global economy. India and Canada have very significant trading relations as well. So India wants to revive the relationship and address all the standing issues. On the other hand, we are also seeing a strategic alignment between India and Canada. Canada has recently announced its Indo-Pacific strategy. Last year in November, Canada came out with its Indo-Pacific strategy, in which it has clearly pointed out that China is a threat, that China has become a disruptive global power. This is because of late, tensions have increased between Canada and China. China has put a lot of diplomatic geopolitical pressure on Canada, as Canada is also a Western country which is close to the US. So the rivalry between US and China has spilled over and it has affected the Canada-China relationship. So Canada has brought out an Indo-Pacific strategy in which it has clearly marked China as a threat, as a disruptive power. And in the same document, it is referring to India as a critical partner in the Indo-Pacific. So this makes it clear that even Canada is seeking a strategic partnership with India, as both share common principles and common values built on democracy and pluralism. So Canada and India both are seeking close political, economic and security relations. And India is also pushing a free trade agreement with Canada. So both countries have common interests. They align with each other. India is eagerly pursuing FTAs with many countries and Canada is one of the focus countries. This year we are expected to sign an early progress trade agreement, which is like a basic foundation for a free trade agreement. And very soon India-Canada might finalize a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. So this would provide for a full-fledged FTA between the two countries. So both the sides have important geopolitical, economic and strategic interests. And that is the reason why India and Canada are trying to repair the damage, address the issues, and it's in this context that the Canadian Foreign Minister has visited India. In the coming months, there will be many more high-level visits because India is hosting the G20 summit. The Canadian Prime Minister will also be coming as part of the G20 summit. So this is the right year for India and Canada to rebuild their relations and establish a strong foundation by addressing all the pressing issues that are there. So that is why this topic is very, very important for the coming exams. Now let's move on to the next article. We shall take a look at a column from page number 7 that helps us understand the budgetary allocation that the government has made for welfare and the social sector, especially the healthcare sector. This article is written by a former Union Health Secretary, K. Sujata Rao. She examines the budgetary allocation made in the recent budget for welfare schemes and social sector. And she specifically focuses on the healthcare budget and points out that the budget appears to neglect the healthcare sector and this could have serious consequences for India. So let's carry out a detailed analysis of the writer's argument. Let's look beyond the article as well and understand the budgetary allocation being made for the social sector and healthcare sector. So the writer's main concern is that the union budget which was presented last week is not paying enough attention to social issues and important sectors like healthcare, education and nutrition. She reminds us the importance of the welfare model, the welfare state. She takes us back to the United Kingdom, how the UK invested heavily in healthcare after the Second World War, and how it launched the National Health Service, the NHS, to provide universal healthcare. European countries, especially UK, they implemented the welfare model of governance after the Second World War. Their objective was mainly to invest heavily in key sectors like education, healthcare, social security, so that they could rebuild and reconstruct their economies, which had been destroyed by the Second World War. So the UK set an example with regard to implementing the welfare model, and it launched universal healthcare through the NHS, the National Health Service. This topic is also in news parallelly because under the NHS system, the health workers in UK have been carrying out massive protests of late. You might have read about this in newspapers as well. So it's good to have this awareness, this extra awareness. So UK championed the welfare model after the Second World War, invested heavily in healthcare and built the NHS model that is a global model today for healthcare system. So this helped rebuild the economy of the UK because healthcare is directly linked to the economic progress of your country. How will your country grow and develop if your population is sick, if they are underfed, if they lack nutrition, and if they are suffering from various diseases? You need a healthy and strong population to develop the country and to grow the country, right? So that is the writer's argument. The crux of the writer's argument is that we need to make more investment in these basic services. The writer says India should also draw lessons from the welfare model. We are a welfare state, yes, but the writer says we should prioritize some key sectors like education, healthcare, nutrition, sanitation, and hygiene. These are the investments which are going to address the socio-economic challenges of India, and it could lead India to become a vibrant economy. The writer says there are some positives in the budget with regard to the social sector. The writer is not entirely critical. The writer admits that yes, there are some positive aspects in the budget with regard to social spending. She even makes a specific mention of these good initiatives. For example, we have the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, which has been launched in a new format, which will provide free food grains throughout the year for 80 crore poor households. Right? So this will help in ensuring food security in the country. The writer also praises the allocation for the aspirational block program launched by Prime Minister Modi, under which special funding and special focus is being given to develop 500 backward blocks in the country. She also makes note of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is focused on providing housing for the poor. She praises the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, which has improved sanitation, hygiene, availability of clean water and toilets. She appreciates the Manrega scheme as well, even though the budget has been cut for Manrega. The writer says that the scheme has helped in providing rural employment, in improving rural demand. And despite the budget cut, the writer says Manrega has been backed by the government. She also praises the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. The fourth edition of the Kaushal Vikas Yojana is being launched to provide for skill development for the country's youth to create job opportunities for them. So all these welfare programs in the social sector are appreciated by the writer. The writer says the budget is providing enough attention, enough priority to these important schemes. But however, the writer's concern is mainly with regard to three sectors, that is education, healthcare, and nutrition. The writer says in these three sectors, adequate investments are not being made. This is not just the problem with the current budget. This has been a trend over several decades. Budgetary allocation for education, healthcare, and nutrition has remained flat. It has been always around 2%, around 1.6 to 2.1%, and no government has made an attempt to increase healthcare expenditure and education expenditure. The writer says no country can grow and develop without investing in education and healthcare. Any government will have to provide for adequate nutrition. And nutrition is not just basic food security through food grains, but also providing other essential nutrients like enough proteins and supplementary food, micronutrients, etc. The writer says there should be universal access to healthcare and education. But in India, education and healthcare both have been heavily privatized, forcing the people to spend out of pocket. So education and healthcare has become inaccessible to the poor, especially quality education, quality healthcare has become inaccessible to the poor population due to the excessive privatization of education and healthcare. The writer says this is because of low investments in public education and in public health. The writer even gives examples of other countries, how they have become developed countries today only by making big investments in education and healthcare. Take, for example, how Scandinavian countries like Norway, Sweden have provided for tremendous socio-economic development, and they have become highly advanced economies today because of their higher allocation for basic services like education, healthcare, social security. She gives the contradictory example as well. She points out how US reduced investments in 1970s in education and healthcare under the Ronald Reagan administration, and how this compromised America's education system and healthcare system. So she makes it very clear that no country can progress and develop without making big investments in education, healthcare, and nutrition. So she's urging India as well to pay attention to these key sectors, as India is still dealing with a large population of illiterate people, unhealthy people, and malnourished people. Right? She even presents data to justify this argument. The writer says that the allocation for education, nutrition, healthcare has been stagnant in many budgets, and this has been further aggravated by the pandemic. The pandemic has pushed millions of people into poverty, according to a recent study. The recent education report, ASER report, which we have covered in our CNA as well, has pointed out the learning gaps in our schooling system. These are very serious concerns. According to the ASER report, our school children are lagging behind even in basic learning skills. They are unable to read a paragraph. They are unable to solve basic mathematical problems. So this points to a critical gap in learning and education. She refers to data from the National Family Health Survey number 5 and shows how stunting and underweight has gone up amongst children as a direct result of lack of nutrition. Due to poor nutrition, due to malnutrition, the writer is pointing out how stunting and underweight children have gone up in percentage over the years. She refers to the budgetary reduction in midday meals scheme, which is vital for nutritional security for school-going children. Even though there has been an increase in enrollment in public schools and a decrease in private schooling, because most families have lost income during the pandemic, they are not able to afford private education. So a clear trend has emerged in India in the last 3-4 years, where private schooling has gone down and enrollment in public schools has increased. Despite this, the government has reduced allocation for the midday meal scheme, which is critical for the nutrition of the child in schools. It is crucial to retain school-going children within the schooling system as well. The writer says despite high inflation, budget has been reduced by 9% for the midday meal scheme program. So this is why the writer says that if we neglect these key sectors, education, nutrition, and especially healthcare, there will be very serious consequences going forward. The writer points out that the healthcare expenditure of 2.1%, which the government has provided for in this year's budget, is simply not enough to deal with India's disease burden. India has not only become vulnerable to various communicable diseases, especially during the pandemic, but India is also reporting a very high load, a very high burden of non-communicable diseases, lifestyle diseases, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, along with mental health, old age conditions regarding geriatric care. So all of this has been adding to the healthcare burden, and the writer is very clear that we lack the resources and infrastructure to provide adequate diagnosis and treatment. Especially our primary health centers are suffering without adequate doctors and adequate infrastructure. The writer says the pandemic has exposed the 3 critical gaps in our healthcare, which is the lack of financial risk protection, which points to very poor health insurance coverage amongst the Indian people, right? Plus out-of-pocket expenditure is very high in India, as public healthcare has not taken care of the healthcare needs. People are forced to opt for private healthcare, and this increases the expenditure for the poor people. They are not able to access quality healthcare. The writer says that primary healthcare system at the grassroots has been broken, and the district hospitals as well have not been well equipped. They are not functioning at their ideal capacity. These are critical flaws which have been further aggravated during the pandemic. So that is why the writer is making a very strong push. She's giving a very strong push to ensure that we infuse more resources and lay down a long-term ambition with higher budget for the healthcare sector and also for education and nutrition. This is the crux of the argument. With all this evidence, the writer is saying that if India has to progress in the coming years, if we have to achieve the dream of becoming a developed nation by 2047, then investments are needed, higher investments are needed in healthcare, education and nutrition. All right. So now moving on to the next article. On page number 7, we have an important article regarding elections in India and India's voter base. This article is bringing out a lot of important data which can be very relevant for your prelims and also for your mains. This article is mainly focusing on the low voter turnout in India. The focus of the article is the low voter turnout in elections. So let's take a look at this article in detail. The article is expressing concern that voter participation in India has been very poor. Data clearly shows that the participation of voters in elections is extremely poor in India, even though the voter base has increased 4 times since 1962. Please look at this chart. Pay attention to this chart given here. It's very, very important. Since 1962 until 2019, until the last Lok Sabha elections, we have seen a 4-fold increase in the number of registered voters in the country. The number of registered voters has gone up 4 times in these 50 to 60 years. Despite this increase, voter participation has not gone up. Data from the last Lok Sabha election held in 2019 shows that nearly 30%, around 1/3 of India's voters did not even participate. Almost 30 crore voters did not even take part in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Today, India has around 94.5 crore registered voters, and 30 crore out of these voters are not even participating. Now, this is a serious concern in a democracy. You cannot have such poor voter participation in a large democratic state like India. The voter participation stands at 67.1% as per the latest data from the last Lok Sabha election. This places India at the 74th rank out of 162 countries with regard to voter turnout and voter participation. That is why the Election Commission of India has also been concerned and worried. The Election Commission of India wants to increase voter turnout to at least 75%. From the current 67%, the Election Commission wants to increase voter participation to 75%. So for this, the Election Commission has been taking up many initiatives to spread awareness, to encourage the voters to go out and participate. It has launched dedicated programs like Sweep to spread awareness amongst voters, to highlight the importance of elections and participating in democratic elections. The Election Commission has engaged the media, social media. It's been engaging with schools and colleges, particularly the youth, to push them to come out and vote in elections. So this article is bringing out some important data in the form of charts. The article shows us that India has the world's highest voter base. We are the largest democratic country in the world with more than 90 crore registered voters. As per latest data, there are more than 94 crore registered voters in the country, highest than any other country. Is that clear? So out of the registered voters, 30 crore are not voting. This is bigger than the population of many countries. If you compare with, let's say, Brazil or Indonesia or even other countries, India's population and India's voter base and those who are not participating in the election, right? It clearly outmatches the other countries in all these aspects. Now, this is a very, very significant concern for India because you have such a large population, young population especially, which is not participating in the electoral process. If you assess this with other countries, compare the data, countries like Bangladesh and Brazil have a better voter turnout than India. Is that clear? Bangladesh and Brazil are registering more than 80% turnout, around 75 to 80% voter turnout. India's voter turnout is just around 67%. That is why we are ranked low. Is that clear? We have a lower ranking compared to even Bangladesh and Brazil with regard to voter participation. Now, according to the Election Commission of India, it has carried out a study, and the study shows that these 30 crore voters who are not participating, majority of them are coming from urban areas, the young voting population, and the migrant voters. These are the top 3 categories who are not voting enough. So please make a note of this. You can get a mains question on these lines, maybe even an essay topic on voter participation in India. The 3 categories which are not coming out to vote are the urban voters, especially in state capitals. Look at this table here. According to data from big cities like, let's say, Bangalore, voter turnout is extremely poor. In the state of Karnataka, the lowest voter turnout is in the capital, in Bangalore. All the other districts have a higher voter turnout. The same is the case with Kolkata, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bhubaneswar, Visakhapatnam. All major cities are staying away largely from the electoral process. Urban voters are not driven, not motivated enough, unlike their rural counterparts. Then the bigger concern is the younger population. The youth who are newly registered on the voter list are not coming out to vote. It shows their lack of interest in Indian politics and issues affecting the country. Second would be the migrant voters. Migrants who keep moving because of work, right? They're not able to go back to their constituencies to cast their vote. These are the 3 groups, the 3 categories which are not participating enough. That is why the Election Commission has adopted a multi-pronged approach to address this issue, and it has launched a major awareness campaign to boost voter participation amongst the youth and amongst urban voters. It is engaging colleges, schools, social media and all other platforms to spread more awareness about the importance of democracy and elections, to push the youth and the urban voters to come out and vote. And recently, it has announced a plan to introduce remote voting. In December, the Election Commission has announced that remote EVMs will be introduced to allow remote voting for migrant workers, so that they can cast their vote wherever they are working and settled. They can cast a vote for their respective constituency without having to travel back to their constituency. So such initiatives are needed by the Election Commission to boost voter participation. That is why this article is very, very important. Now moving on to the 4th article, it deals with a revolutionary technology for treating cancer. And this again is a very important topic. It's called CAR T cell therapy. Trust me guys, this topic is very, very relevant for your prelims and also for your mains. You can most definitely expect a question on CAR T cell therapy. So let me explain what this is and why it is a revolutionary technology. See, cancer, as you know, is a brutal, life-threatening condition. It puts the patient through immense suffering, right? And eventually, the death rate, not just in India but around the world, has been quite high for those who are afflicted with cancer, right? It's a life-threatening condition. There are a number of different types of cancers and the treatments available are very, very limited. This is something that we are yet to comprehend entirely and devise effective diagnosis and treatment solutions. But there are 3 lines of treatment which are generally followed. One is through surgery, where the cancerous growth, the tumor, right, which has become cancerous, is removed surgically to prevent the further spread of the tumor, to prevent the further spread of the cancer cells. The second form of cancer treatment or cancer therapy is radiotherapy, where ionized radiation is delivered to the tumor. The patient is exposed to radiation, ionizing radiation, which breaks up the cancer cells, the tumor, thus trying to arrest the growth of the cancer. And the third one is systemic therapy. Systemic therapy involves the administration of certain medicines, such as chemotherapeutic drugs, which are targeted at the tumor cells. There is a targeted delivery of systemic drugs which aim to target these cancerous cells. These are the 3 types of cancer therapies or treatments that are available. Over the years, surgery and radiotherapy has advanced. There has been some refinement in these treatments. The treatment has become better, more effective with little side effects. But the most promising treatment here is systemic therapy. Systemic therapy can be very, very effective if we are able to master the technology. So under this, we already have few treatments like chemotherapy, immunotherapy, but the most promising systemic therapy is CAR T cell therapy. So let us see what kinds of systemic therapies we have currently. What is chemotherapy and immunotherapy? And what is this new technology called CAR T cell therapy? This is what you need to understand. Chemotherapy involves the administration of chemotherapeutic drugs, which is usually injected into the body. And these drugs are designed to act preferentially on the cancer cells. They are basically designed to target the cancer cells, act upon it preferentially. But the problem with chemotherapy is that side effects are very, very serious. Its effectiveness also differs from depending on the type of cancer, depending on the patient as well. The effectiveness, the response rate, it differs and it is seen as very modest. The success of chemotherapy is quite modest in its success rate. But it does have very significant side effects because it attacks other normal body cells as well. It leads to many serious side effects. The other systemic therapy is immunotherapy, where new variety of targeted agents have been developed. New medicines have been developed which are injected again and provides for targeted treatment of cancer. These immune cells, they bind the tumor growth. They target the tumor cells. They try to boost your immune response and they try to break down the tumor. But this again is limited in its effectiveness. It is useful only in case where the tumor is showing the target cells, where the tumorous cells are showing up, and only then the immunotherapy can work. The immune cells can go and wrap the tumor cells and be effective. So immunotherapy also has limited effectiveness, but however the side effects are lesser compared to chemotherapy. Chemotherapy has much more serious side effects compared to immunotherapy. It has fewer side effects because it is targeting only the cancerous cells. It is more specific in its targeting. It does not affect the non-tumorous cells, unlike chemotherapy. So systemic therapy has a lot of promise, but the problem is the side effects and the lack of efficiency. This is where CAR T cell therapy comes in, and it's a landmark development. It's a revolutionary technology. Under CAR T cell therapy, let me tell you how the cancer treatment works. The blood from the patient is drawn. The blood from the patient is drawn under this therapy, and from the blood, the T cells are separated. I hope you know that T cells are part of your immune system. They are part of your white blood cells. T cells play a critical role in your immunity against diseases and infections. So the T cells from your blood will be isolated, from the patient's blood will be isolated, and they will be engineered in the lab. In the lab, they will be modified. A gene is inserted. A specific protein is inserted to activate your T cell. This protein is nothing but CAR, chimeric antigen receptor. Please make a note. This is the protein which is activated. A gene is introduced into the T cell to make it more effective, and this is the activation of the T cell. So this gene or protein is introduced. It is added to the T cells to make it more effective, to increase the immune response, and they are multiplied in the lab. So millions of CAR T cells will be produced in the lab. So essentially, cancer patients, their blood would be taken and the T cells will be isolated, and in the lab, a modification is done where the CAR protein structure is added, the chimeric antigen receptor. This activates the T cell and makes it more effective in its immune response. These CAR T cells are now multiplied. They're grown in the lab, they are multiplied, and this CAR T cell rich blood is injected, infused back to the patient's body. So now, the patient who receives the CAR T cells through this blood infusion will start witnessing a much better immune response. It will basically train your immune system to target the specific cancer cells. It will not target the non-cancerous cells. It will target the cancerous cells. It will go behind the specific cancer-causing cells, and this is how it's a very effective and a revolutionary treatment. These cells are also called living drugs. The CAR T cells are called living drugs. This could be a prelims question. Living drugs seen in news refers to what? It refers to CAR T cells, which are used in CAR T cell therapy. These are living drugs because your own T cells are taken from your blood. They are engineered to become effective against cancer. It becomes a drug, a treatment against cancer. And with better immune response, your own immune system will fight against the cancer cells. This treatment has given a lot of results, and hence they are referred to as living drugs. The only problem is the process is very complex, requires advanced technology, and it is very, very expensive. Is that clear? But the technology holds a lot of promise to treat cancer in the coming years, especially blood-related cancers such as leukemia, the cancer of the white blood cells, leukemia, and lymphoma, the cancer of the lymphomatic system, the lymph nodules. So these cancers especially can be very effectively treated with CAR T cell therapy. The only problem is the process is complex, requires advanced labs, advanced equipment and resources, and also the process is very, very expensive. It can cost almost $1 million in the United States. Right now, it has been availed by certain celebrities who can afford the cost. But the question is, can it become affordable in India? For this, the government has to give a push, introduce the technology, the treatment. Because see, in India, you can scale up things very easily. So when anything is provided on scale, the cost is going to go down automatically. The treatment will not be effective enough unless and until it is accessible and affordable to the poor people and the common people. Right? Even the middle class, lower sections should be able to access this revolutionary therapy someday. Yes, we are years away from that, but this is the time for the government to act on it, to start promoting CAR T cell therapy and start its wider adoption so that we can drive the cost down in the coming years and make it more affordable for patients in India as well. So this is a revolutionary treatment for cancer, and the topic is very important for your exams. Now coming to the last article, which is related to left-wing extremism or Naxalism in India. As you know, Naxalism took root in the year 1967, inspired by the Maoist doctrine of Mao Zedong. As Mao Zedong championed the Chinese Civil War in 1940s and led to the People's Republic of China under the Communist Party, this radical extremist ideology gained popularity around the world and took root in India as well in 1967. It originated at the Naxalbari village in West Bengal. Hence, Maoism in India is called Naxalism. It is a type of left-wing extremist ideology which believes in an armed struggle against the state. It calls for an armed overthrow of the state to capture state power. That is why this ideology is an extremist ideology. It leads to insurgency and terrorism, and it has no place in a civilized democracy like India. This ideology exploits the suffering of farmers, peasants, tribal communities, workers, landless, etc. The most downtrodden sections of the society who might have suffered because of poor governance, injustice, etc. They are targeted by these extremists. They are indoctrinated and brainwashed to take up an armed rebellion against the state, to throw the state out and capture state power. Is that clear? Maoist philosophy believes in focusing on the most weaker sections, the regions which have been neglected, regions where governance has been missing, administration has failed, where there is excessive corruption, nexus between the private industry, politicians and the government. So farmers, peasants, landless, tribal communities, workers who would have suffered because of poor governance and corruption, they are the targets of left-wing extremists. So this movement has raged in India since 1960s, and it became a very serious threat in 1970s and 1980s. At one point, it reached a situation where multiple states in India were very badly affected by Naxalism. Here you are looking at the red corridor or the Naxal corridor of India, and at one point more than 30% of India was under Naxal influence, at least in 180 districts, particularly in the 1980s, were under Naxal influence. In at least 60 to 80 districts, Naxals had a strong hold, especially in Bihar, West Bengal region, in Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Maharashtra region. This was during 1970s, 1980s. But over a period of time, India has tackled the Naxal threat with better security operations, with effective counter-insurgency operations, and also by focusing on development to bridge the deficit in governance. By following this two-pronged approach, India weakened the left-wing extremist movement. There were two different Naxal outfits that were operating at one point. We had Maoist Communist Center of India operating in the Bihar West Bengal belt in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. We had the PWG, the People's War Group, in the Andhra Pradesh Odisha belt operating in the 1980s. These groups were weakened in 1990s, and when we were about to eliminate Naxalism, these groups, they merged to form the CPI Maoist. In 2004, the two outfits merged to form CPI Maoist, and it became a notorious insurgent terrorist organization. Since the regrouping, CPI Maoist became a dangerous threat. It started carrying out many major attacks by establishing a stronghold around Chhattisgarh and Odisha. This became the new hotspot of Naxalism. So between 2004 to 2010, Naxal violence increased and became one of India's biggest internal security threats. So to tackle the threat, the government of India has adopted a two-pronged approach, a two-step approach. One is intelligence-based security operations involving coordination between center and the state, and the other is development to provide good governance in the affected areas. Through this approach, in the last 13 to 14 years, India has seen a major decline in Naxal activity. Look at this map from 2017. The data shared from Home Ministry shows that Naxal corridor has seen a major decline. This has further reduced in the last 4 to 5 years as well. Naxal violence, Naxal attacks have gone down. The government has been effectively dealing with the threat, and this is why the topic is in news. Because Union Home Minister Amit Shah has brought the data of the Home Ministry and presented this to a parliamentary committee. There is a separate parliamentary committee looking at left-wing extremism in the country. So the Home Minister has presented data and has said that we are seeing a decrease of 76% in Naxal violence as of 2022 compared to 2010. In 2010, more than 1,000 deaths were reported in the Naxal corridor amongst our security forces and civilians. Last year, this has come down to just 98. Less than 100 deaths have been reported last year. So this is a major decline in Naxal violence. There has been a 76% reduction in Naxal violence. According to the Home Minister, today the affected districts have been brought down to just 45. In 1980s, 180 districts were under Naxal influence. In 2010, around 90 districts were under Naxal influence. Now the number has been reduced by half, and just around 45 districts, especially in Chhattisgarh, Odisha belt, and in parts of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Maharashtra. This is where you have few districts which are still under Naxal influence. Out of these 45, Naxals have a stronghold in a maximum of 15 to 20 districts, not more than that. So this marks a major decline in Naxalism, in left-wing extremism, and this is because our security forces like CRPF, which is the primary anti-Naxal force of the center, along with BSF, have taken up credible measures to tackle the threat. They have been carrying out effective counter-insurgency operations based on reliable intelligence generated by the Intelligence Bureau. The state police also have been playing a critical role. All the concerned state governments and their respective forces have played an important role. Through enhanced security operations and better development, we have achieved this success. India has been able to cut the financing of Naxals as well. The funding routes have been cut. Naxals mainly raise finances through extortion, through drug production, drug trafficking, and through other illegal activities. These financing routes have been curbed and money laundering, anti-money laundering measures have been effectively implemented to curb the financing of Naxal activities. The infrastructure also has been improved here. Better roads have been created, better basic facilities have been provided, and the police stations also have been fortified because Naxals mainly attack police stations to target the security forces, to loot the weapons as well. So police stations have been fortified under dedicated schemes which are sponsored by the Ministry of Home Affairs. The Home Ministry provides for security related expenditure to the state governments. This is another important scheme. The states are encouraged to modernize their police forces to fight Naxalism, and whatever expenses they incur in this modernization, it will be compensated, it will be reimbursed by the Ministry of Home Affairs under the SRE scheme, the Security Related Expenditure Scheme. So through such targeted schemes, with coordination between central and state governments, through effective action of the security forces, their usage of better technology like drones, helicopters, special forces, etc., and by improving infrastructure and governance, India has managed to bring down the threat, and even the public participation has played an important role. The local people in these areas, affected areas, have moved away from Naxal influence and they have been backing the government forces. So collectively, India has brought down the threat and there has been a significant decline in left-wing extremism. That is why this topic is very, very important for internal security. So this brings my discussion for today to an end. We have covered all the important topics comprehensively. Now please go to the Telegram channel. Subscribe to our Telegram channel. The link is provided in the description below, because as soon as the session ends, there is a quiz on all these topics. Take those questions and prepare thoroughly for the upcoming prelims. Also take these mains practice questions, write your answers, and ensure you post them on the answer writing portal, for which the link has been given in the description. So that is it from my side. I hope it was a good, fruitful session. Thanks for watching. If you did like it, please support us by liking the video. Let's see if you can help us hit 4,000 likes on this video. Just a small target. Just show that extra love and support which keeps us motivated to do better. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.